on Dynamite this past Wednesday, Kenny Omega challenged Jon Moxley. Now, Jon Moxley really had already challenged Kenny Omega, but Omega accepted the challenge and said he was going to up the ante a little bit. This would be no regular match. This is going to be, for the first time in AEW history, an exploding barbed wire death match for the AEW Championship at Revolution. So that's how Omega is going to beat Moxley without Moxley taking the pin. I assume that's why we're getting this stipulation. Let these guys go out there and kill each other, and Moxley can lose for the second time in a row to Omega without having to be pinned for it. Moxley was on Wrestling Observer Radio and said this about the match, because you gotta know that this guy is just on cloud nine. I mean, he comes from that background, wrestling death matches and hardcore style matches. We've seen him do that in New Japan. We've seen him do it in AEW. Him and Omega, in fact, had that lights out match, that non-sanctioned match at Full Gear a couple of years ago. So this is right up his alley. But this is what he had to say about the match. And credit to Alex Hunt of Features of Wrestling for the transcription here. I would never have thought in a million years that we would be doing this. I am a fan of these matches. Never would have expected that I would get to do one in AEW when this was brought to me. So he made it clear that this is not an idea that he was getting on Tony Khan about. He was pitching. This was presented to him. This may well have been a Tony Khan idea. Tony Khan, I get the sense, likes his deathmatch wrestling. But he makes it clear that this was an idea that was pitched to him. He said, I wasn't going to turn that down. I'm like a kid in a candy store. He said, this is the cool thing about AEW and Tony Khan. One thing I can't stand is promising something I can't deliver on. I used to say things like, I'm going to put you through hell in a cell. But we all know I'm not. It's going to be the same as every other match. I've pitched so much stuff over the years. Everything imaginable I have pitched. Which is probably true, by the way. We heard the stories about the stuff that he was pitching to Brock Lesnar for their match at WrestleMania 32. Which was not a very good match. It was not as good as I was hoping it would be. I was hoping that would be a knockdown, a WrestleMania classic. The way that Lesnar and Punk had a classic, right? No DQ style match at SummerSlam in 2013. I was kind of hoping that we would get the same kind of match from Moxley and Lesnar at WrestleMania, and Moxley said he was presenting all kinds of ideas. He himself would take a lot of abuse, not even Brock. He was going to introduce all these weapons and stuff. I don't remember if he, was it a staple gun or thumbtack? It was something crazy that he wanted to do in that match. But he said that he was met with total resistance to all of his ideas. And I think that was around the time Brock he had it in his head that he might be going back to UFC to do a fight. Maybe he just didn't want to take any chances and get injured. I don't know. But I know that's always been a sore spot for Moxley. Not very happy with how that whole situation turned out. So I believe that 100% that he has pitched tons of ideas that probably went in one ear and out the other. He said, but it's always the same stuff that we've always seen. Something simple, like tearing the canvas off and tearing up the boards. He says, I pitched that to Hunter, Vince, and Seth, and they look at me like I'm fucking stupid. They didn't get it at all. Vince said, I don't think the people will understand it. Of course not. Can't happen. Hunter liked thumbtacks when Cactus Jack was putting him over, but whatever, dude. Now I've said to Tony, don't put me in these situations unless we can deliver. Be careful what you wish for. I am not in the business of under-delivering promises. In situations like this, the gloves are off. Any potential thing that me and Kenny can think of is a possibility. We both have this compulsion to take this to as high a level as possible. We are both similar in the way we think. Our two creative brains will create a wild night in Jacksonville. I am 110% invested in this. We will see where this ranks in the former death matches that we have to live up to. If you're going to do a death match, you may as well go all the way with it. So if they're committed to this and they're going to do this, then hey, take it to the max. Make it as memorable as you can be. I'm not really a deathmatch kind of guy, but if that's what you're going to do, then hey, got to go balls to the wall with it. But I saw the person who runs, I have to mention this, and I like Terry Funk. Terry Funk is a legend Terry Funk is I mean, what can be said about Terry Funk? Terry Funk is one of the best. But I saw the person who runs Terry Funk's Twitter account relayed a message from Terry. Sometimes he'll relay video messages from Terry. This was just a tweet. But this message was from Terry. He's been having some tough days with his hip, right? Dustin Rhodes tweeted about a week or so ago. People got all freaked out because they thought Terry was in failing health. He was dying or something. He posted this very cryptic tweet about, keeping him in your prayers and all this stuff. But apparently he's just been going through some really, really bad hip pain, which is not surprising. Terry Funk is got to be well into his 70s. The guy, well into his 50s, was still doing moonsaults. So it's not really that surprising that he would be, physically in a lot of pain. But this person said that Terry wanted to wish Moxley and Omega the best of luck in their exploding barbed wire death match. And I chuckled when I read that, because I'm just thinking to myself, only in pro wrestling do you have someone wishing the best of luck. Like let's say football, right? We just had the Super Bowl a few weeks ago. And so you will hear from retired NFL players and quarterbacks, legendary players who have won the Super Bowl, who have been in the Super Bowl, and they do media week. And sometimes those guys are interviewed and they'll wish the best of luck to the quarterbacks who are going to the Super Bowl, right? Best of luck. You guys are going to love it. It's going to be great. Enjoy it. All the best. In pro wrestling, it's a little bit different, because here the legends from yesteryear, they chime in and they wish you the best of luck as you enter into an exploding barbed wire death match with thumbtacks and all kinds of weapons where you're going to just slice and dice yourself open. Best of luck. He says the match is a good way for AEW to wake up Vince McMahon with a good kick in the ass. Yes, I'm sure two guys mutilating each other is exactly what is going to light a fire under Vince McMahon's rotting corpse to suddenly improve his product. I'm sure Terry's heart is in the right place. I love Terry Funk. But no, all the changes that WWE, that product is in dire need of, exploding barbed wire matches ain't one of them. Sting! I can't do it like Tony Schiavone does, but Sting. Gotta talk about Sting. Sting was on Dynamite on Wednesday. Sting got stang by Brian Cage. They finally did something with Sting, and it made me almost turn away. I was not expecting Sting to take a full-on bump, a full-on powerbomb from, of all people, Brian Cage, who did not hold back. Brian Cage powerbombed the shit out of this guy. And this was the first real bump in the ring that Sting has taken in 5.5 years. At least on TV. I don't know if he's been training in a ring somewhere. Who knows? But the guy is in his early 60s. I would think he wants to work off some of the ring rust. But this was his first bump since the match with Seth Rollins when he got hurt that night at the Night of Champions pay-per-view in September, 2015. And he took a hell of a powerbomb. Now, he's fine, but I just think when you have somebody like Sting, who is as old as he is and has not been in the ring for over 5 years. I remember Kurt Angle when WWE brought him back, and he was really hoping to wrestle. Kurt wanted to get one more year and then retire. Vince McMahon had other ideas, and Vince McMahon said, we're going to put you in the Hall of Fame, and I'm going to make you the general manager of Raw. And Kurt hated that because he still wanted to wrestle. He could see the end on the horizon, and he envisioned his retirement as coming maybe a year later. But what happens, as he explained it, is when you're not in the ring every night, every week, every month, taking bumps, which he was still doing in Impact, even after he left Impact, he was doing some independent stuff. When you just stop, when they take you out of the ring and you're not taking those bumps physically on a routine basis, and the older you are, your body, it's hard to adapt and adjust when, let's say, 6 months or a year later, you're back in the ring. All of a sudden, you're all crippled up. You have this horrible arthritis. It's actually better for your body to be all calloused up and be taking the bumps and hitting the ropes and stuff and not stop like that. I've heard a lot of wrestlers talk about that. That's why Kurt looked the way he looked when they finally brought him back and put him in the ring with the Shield, and he was doing stuff on TV where he was all hunched over and it looked like he could barely move. Now, he has a lot of injuries, so he's going to be moving probably like that anyway. But that's why he looked, as bad as he did in some of those matches. I don't know what to expect when we see Sting in a full-on match. Based on what we saw on Wednesday, I'm not so sure that this is going to be a cinematic style match, even though he himself said on the AEW podcast that the whole agreement and discussion he had when he first came in with Tony Khan was under the idea of doing cinematic style stuff. We won't know until March 7th at Revolution. It's going to be him and Darby Allin against Team Taz in a street fight. Is it going to be a traditional wrestling street fight in Daly's place? They just brawl all over the building, or is it going to be pre-taped and shot elsewhere, maybe in a back alley somewhere? We don't know. But this was a full-on bump from a large, powerful man that Sting took, and thankfully he did not explode into a pile of ash. So I'm hopeful that he can get through the match just fine. It is interesting. There have been reports that Cody Rhodes is lobbying heavily, or at least has expressed interest, heavy interest, in having a match with Sting. If you remember, when Sting debuted in AEW, what my prediction was. My prediction was, in 2021, Sting would have 3 matches. And the first one would be a tag match with Darby against Team Taz, which is exactly what we're getting, and that was the easiest one probably to predict. But the other 2 were, I said he's going to have a match with Chris Jericho, and he's going to have a match with Cody. And I am convinced the match with Jericho is inevitable at some point, and now that we hear Cody is interested in really pushing hard for a match with Sting, things are shaping up exactly the way that I thought they would be. But first, we got to get past Revolution and make sure Sting doesn't get killed. That's the most important thing. When you have any kind of a neck or a spinal issue, you got to be concerned. I also wanted to mention this. They were running an angle on Dynamite Wednesday with Hangman Page and Matt Hardy, where Hangman outsmarted Hardy, didn't sign the services contract that Hardy put in front of him. He swapped the contracts. Anyway, now they're going to have a match at Revolution where the winner will get 100% of the loser's quarter 1 earnings. So, which, I mean, who cares? But Scotty on Twitter had an interesting suggestion about where this all may be going because, we've seen the Dark Order and their affinity for Hangman Page, and it looks like, we may yet see Hangman end up joining the Dark Order, even though he turned them down already. But Scotty had an interesting suggestion, and I don't think it's going to happen, but I did think it was worth bringing up here, maybe even getting your thoughts on this. He suggested, what if the Dark Order storyline with Hangman Page is a swerve, with Matt Hardy being revealed as their new leader? Because remember, Matt Hardy was at least under consideration for the role earlier last year before they settled on Brody Lee. There were a lot of people who thought that's how Matt Hardy is going to come in. He's going to be the exalted one. He's going to come in and, Broken Matt is going to lead the Dark Order, and they went with Brody instead. But it would also make sense, Hangman has already said no to the Dark Order. They wanted him to be their leader, and he said, look, I like you guys, but no. And he rejected them. So what if the whole thing is just a swerve, and in the end, Hardy is now going to lead the Dark Order, and they, turn on Hangman and cost him the match at Revolution? Look, it's certainly possible. The thing about it is, they have Brody's son, right? Brody Lee Jr., -1. He was actually there again on TV just the other week. Didn't have a speaking role or anything, but he was sort of directing traffic as the Dark Order did a run-in. And I guess -1 would be the de facto leader. So, are they actively looking for someone to take over the leadership position? Or are we just going with the kid as being the leader of the group? I don't know if they're looking to replace Brody Jr. in that role. But it would be an interesting swerve given that Hangman has already turned down the group's offer. Maybe this is their way of coming back to him and paying him back for it.